Hey, kia ora, Helen Brahms here, coming to you live from Mesa in Arizona. I hope you're all having a super fantastic, sparkling, winning Wednesday. Oh, damn, I closed the window. So I'm on my phone because we had technical difficulty. I got everything set up to go in the Facebook, on my laptop, hit the go live button. It does this little countdown thing, and then it gets to 1, and it comes up and says, we can't go live for whatever reason. It just says, sorry, can't do it. And I'm like, what? So I tried again, and it says, please try again. So I try it again. Same thing. Comes up with a message saying we can't go live. And I'm like, you've got the camera on. You've just counted down to 1, and all of a sudden now you decide you can't go live. Whatever. I have a phone. Here I am on my phone. It's not a problem, which is probably just as well because my view with the laptop would have included all of this side of things because my desk is covered in genealogy stuff right now. So what have been your wins today? What wins have you had today or the week? Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to celebrate those wins with you. I had an awesome accountability call with my accountability coach today. She got to hear some of the challenges that have been going on this week, some of the highs, some of the lows. We had a great conversation. So that's always, I love those calls every week. Getting to talk with my accountability coach is awesome because we talk about what happened over the week. If there's any challenges come up, we talk through them. And then it's like, okay, what's on the books for this coming week? What are you doing this week to move forward? And she's always asking me, what are you doing this week to move forward? What are you doing? What's in the plans? What's in the plans, rubber band? What's the plan, rubber band? Something like that. She has these really, really quirky little sayings. I love them. Sometimes I'll actually sit here with a pen and paper and actually write down all the little quirky lines that she has. Yesterday I told you that I sent the textbook off for my genealogy course off to Kinko's to get it printed. They were supposed to deliver it this morning before 12. At 1:30 I gave them a call and go, where is it? Where's my tracking number? You sent me an email stating that the job was done and that I would be notified of the tracking number. I said it was supposed to be delivered by 12 o'clock. I paid the extra for it to be delivered by 12 because I had the afternoon blocked off, with the exception of my accountability call, to get some more done on the course. And they're sort of like, oh, well, can we take your name and number? I said, would you like the order number as well so that you can easily find it? So I gave them the order number and all that. They called back while I was on my accountability call. So then I called back after my call and they apologized profusely. It had not gone out. It was still sitting on the table to be delivered. So the store man, I think she was the store manager, she said, I'm just waiting for somebody to come in. As soon as they get in here, I will be in my car and I will personally deliver it to you, and we are refunding your shipping charges. I was like, yes. And so she said, I'll be there in about 30 minutes. I think it took her almost an hour to get here. She delivered it, and Zephy and I were outside. So I said, okay, what else can I do in the meantime? Because I really did not want to start reading this thing online. And so I have my big 2-foot pile of magazines. So I have been going through them, ripping out some articles, and tossing the rest on the recycle pile. They actually have a bin not far from here where you can recycle all your newspapers and your magazines and all those shopping flyer things. So so I was happy, we'll be happy to pull out my little pink cart sometime this week and pile all those magazines in there, and Zephy and I will go for a walk over there and dump them all and down the chutes and everything else. It'll be interesting because I'll have Zephy in one hand and the cart in the other hand. So that'll be an interesting walk. But yeah, so I've started sorting through the magazines again too, and pulled out some great articles, and some I'm keeping and some will be sent to some people. And so that's always a lot of fun. So we were sitting outside doing that when the lady turned up, and Zephy was busy playing with her Kong, and she had the big Kong out again today. If I pull out the small one, she'll probably look at me like, what the heck? But she'll still play with it anyway. So we got that done today, so I was happy to get that process started. And I've been watching the Genealogy Roadshow as well. keeping my hand in the genealogy stuff. And one of the reasons and people go, well, why would you watch the Genealogy Roadshow? Well, for one, I'm interested in genealogy, and but two, the genealogists in this will actually give you some really good tips about places you can go to search for things, how they did the process. They take you to these really cool places. Like the show I was watching today, they were in Boston, and they went to one of the libraries there, which was the first, it's one of the archives. It's one of the first archives to be established in the US, and they gave me the year and all of that. And did I write that down? No, I did not. I didn't even write down the name of the place. But it's where people will send their documents. Like if they've got birth certificates, marriage certificates, photo albums, all of that sort of stuff. Like if people are clearing out the house, out a relative's house, and nobody wants any of the vital records that have been collected over the years, you can actually send them there, and they will archive them for genealogists, because you have to be a member of the society. Yeah, you have to be a member of the society to be able to go in there and look at the archives and stuff, especially at some of the archives. And and Joshua Taylor, who's one of the genealogists, was showing us through the place, and he said, some of the stuff will even be sent in, like in this old suitcase, and it was an old suitcase that had the old worn travel stickers over it. And he said, the suitcase will get archived as well. And I'm like, that's really cool that they have the ability to do that. So now I know where another place I can look at sending out the Brahms side of the documents to, if nobody in the family wants them. And so that's really cool that we have resources available like that. So if there are documents, photo albums that you want kept, but nobody in the family wants them, you have a place that they can go. So archivists can archive them, and those doing family research can later on research the documents if they fall into their tree. So that was pretty cool to find out resources like this. And of course, when they're talking to somebody about the question that they have, they go, oh, we went to this resource, and that they will explain a little bit about the history of the time period that we're talking about. Like today I learned all about the Salem witch trials, because that was one of the things that came up. And it happened to be, Joshua Taylor happened to be the genealogist explaining it all, and it's one of his favorite time periods to talk about. And so there was a connection for this woman that he was interviewing back to, he was a guy that came over on the Mayflower, John Eldon. Yes, John Eldon. And he was also a male that was convicted of witchcraft. And he actually took off before any trial or anything else, and then he came back later on after they had abolished after they had stopped doing all the witch trials and stuff and the executions and things, and he came back and got pardoned and all of that sort of stuff. But it turns out he was actually on the Mayflower, which meant that this woman was related to somebody who was on the Mayflower, and it was like her 10th or 11th great grandfather, I think it was. It's somewhere up there in the double digits, like 10 or 11, and so she was really happy to find that connection, and the fact that he was actually found innocent of witchcraft. So it was just, and it all started when some little 5-year-old kid in the street turns around and goes, he cursed me, or whatever it was that she said, that people arrested. He was then arrested. He managed to escape and go off, and then he came back later on after they'd abolished the witch trials and got pardoned and all of that sort of thing. So it's kind of cool. It's amazing what you listen to. But Joshua actually did another really great thing, and I was busy and I've remembered this time to take notes, and so I was taking notes. So this guy comes in and he wanted to know if there was a family rumor that he was related to John Winthrop, who was one of the first governors of Massachusetts. And so he wanted to know about that, and so Joshua was taking him back through the family tree and everything else. And it turned out that not only was Governor John Winthrop his 11th great-grandfather, also on the same family line, married into the family. So John Winthrop's daughter married a Dudley, and Thomas Dudley, who was the father-in-law of John Winthrop's daughter, so Thomas Dudley was also a governor of Massachusetts as well. And so that was another 11th great-grandfather. So he had two 11th great-grandfathers who were founders there in Massachusetts, who were both governors of Massachusetts. They founded Boston. I think they founded Boston, yeah. But they they established the charter to establish Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1629. So like 1629, wow. I mean, that was just amazing. And then in 1650, Thomas Dudley wrote the charter to establish Harvard University. And I was like, that is so cool. And this is the pedigree this guy had. And so then Joshua turns around and says, so we started looking through your tree a little bit. And he said, here's some of the famous people who are in your tree. You are your 10th great aunt is Anne Bradstreet, who was the first published female poet in the US. Then you've got Tennessee Williams, who is the playwright Tennessee Williams, who is your 6th cousin twice removed. Then he was also related to Humphrey Bogart, who was his 8th cousin 3 times removed. He's got Amelia Earhart in there, that was 11th cousin 2 times removed. He also had Alan Shepard, the first American in space. He was also the 5th person to walk on the moon. He was 8th cousin twice removed. And so he says, you've got a fantastic pedigree there and a great, a very strong family tree and all these people. And he goes, oh, wait, I forgot. There is one more. And he says, this one is your 13th cousin once removed. And he puts up his own picture. So the genealogist was actually related as a 13th cousin once removed to the guy he had been telling all this information to. I thought, how cool is that? That is just really cool. I thought that was so cool. And the guy was just all like, what? Wow. I mean, he was blown away by who was in his family tree, in his extended family tree. In that same building, we learned about Ireland and about how all the censuses from the 1800s in Ireland got lost in around the 1920s when there was a big fire in Dublin in the building where they were held. I was like, darn, still trying to find my great-grandmother and my great-great-grandmother. Hang on. 2 times great-grandmother and 3 times great-grandmother. I know the 2 times great-grandmother was born in the police barracks hospital in Dublin, but her mother is the one that's the mystery as to where she was born. So, but then they were talking about cancellation books. I thought, what the hell is a cancellation book? And it's almost like a handwritten directory of people who lived in a parish or an area or something, and then if they died or they immigrated, their name got crossed off. It literally got crossed out of the book, and somebody else's name. There was this one relative they were trying to find, and his name had been crossed out, and the name Elizabeth, who was his wife, had her name put there because she was still living at that address, but he was no longer there because he had died. And so he literally got cancelled. So there's a line through his name and Elizabeth's name written above it. And so that was kind of interesting. And then her it was a guy. And then his grandfather was had also been crossed out in the cancellation book. And she says, now usually it is for a death, but there's also another reason that they can be cancelled. And he goes, could he have immigrated? And she says, yes, that's the other reason. And it turns out that his grandfather was on the maiden voyage of Carpathia. And she says, here's his name on the thing. And she says, now I want to draw your attention to one other thing. She said, if you look up and you go and see there, and she goes, the name of he goes, oh my gosh, is that the Carpathia? And she goes, yes, he was actually on the maiden voyage of the Carpathia, which sailed on the 6th of May, 1903. And he sits there and he goes, that's 9 years before they answered the SOS call for the Titanic. And so Carpathia was the first ship to arrive where the Titanic sunk, and they rescued over 700 survivors. So this guy was sort of like, this is awesome. The fact that his grandfather had been on the maiden voyage of the Carpathia, which was later the ship that responded to the Titanic. So it was very interesting learning all these little bits of history, and I love the fact that they go in and they tell you the history, what the times were like in that area, what was going on in that and during that time, so you'd understand what was happening. And then I learned about a thing called orphan trains. I'm like, what the hell is an orphan train? And this woman had come in because there was it her great-grandfather, I think it was. No, her grandfather. And there were rumors that he had been on the orphan train. And I'm like, orphan train? What the hell is an orphan train? But apparently there were trains that would have, and they were called orphan trains, whether there was 1 or 2 children on them to a entire carriage full of children. And they went from New York, and they were shipped west. They were put on the trains and shipped west. It started in 1853 and ran through till 1920. There was 100, and it was basically to send children to find a better life for them. There was 150,000 children that were put on these orphan trains during that time period. And they then, they basically were put on a bidding block of things like, here is this child who wants to take care of them. And then the child, and they actually showed the document of her grandfather when he was 9 years old. He was indentured to the family that took him in for 12 years as a farm laborer. And it actually had his signature on the document. And she said, this is really, rare. He was 9 years old, and he actually signed this own document that he signed up for 10 years of indentured service to this family that took him in when he got to Illinois in 1895. So it was very interesting that this is how the people would take care of these kids, is they would put them in indentured service for, based on their age, how many years until they turned 18, 19, 20, whatever it was. And but part of their indentured service is that when especially with the boys, when the boys had finished, because it was written on this guy's agreement, that when he had finished his 12 years of service, he would be given 2 new suits, $150, and there was a couple of other things that he was given as well to help him get a start in life. So I thought that was a very interesting time in history and a very interesting story. But we found out how he and his brothers ended up on the orphan train. In the fact that his father died, he left this money to the family. It wasn't enough to support them all, and the mother ended up putting them into the New York juvenile asylum. And the asylum, and it wasn't for asylum for the insane. This was one where children were put to get good education, good food, clothing, all of that sort of, almost like an orphanage. But they were educated when they were there. And so it wasn't a place where they just slept and stayed. It was, they actually got schooling while they were there and learnt crafts and trades and all of that sort of stuff. And then but there was records that their mother came and visited them often. She just could not take care of them. She didn't have the resources to take care of them. And so they ended up getting put on this orphanage train and sent west to Illinois, where they were, especially her grandfather was indentured for 12 years to basically pay back for this family taking him in. So it was, another interesting little tidbit that you pick up when watching shows like Genealogy Roadshow, and you hear about that. And she was sort of, and this woman was sort of like, I just can't imagine it. When my daughter turned 9 and I see how she is, I thought, how did my grandfather, when he was 9, got put on a train, not knowing where he was going, and was sent out west and got put with this family who he didn't know, and what was going through the mind of a 9-year-old? Did he ever get back up with his mother, hook up with his mother? But his mother seemed to fall off the face of the earth at that time. But they did find the family plot in New York with the headstone there, but it just had the family name on it. But in the plot records, there was the father, two siblings, and his mother. But there's no record of the mother passing away. There's a whole bunch of records about this woman that's actually missing. They don't know where she went, what she did, or anything. They couldn't find her on any of the records they went and searched and all of that sort of thing. So this woman was kind of happy to find out all of that, and to know that she now had that there was somewhere where she could go visit her great-grandparents. So that she could now go visit her great-grandparents. It was something that showed that they existed, because there was this tombstone there with just the family name on it, but now she knew where they were. So she was very happy to find out that. So it's very interesting, the stuff that you can find and the stories that you learn along the way. And so I have learned a lot in this past couple of weeks, researching different families, different areas. Like, I've learned a lot about Kentucky. I've learned about the Hatfield-McCoy feud, because there was one of the things there was a connection to that. I learned about General George Custer. I've learned about another part of his family, like a distant line of his. I've learned about how they got settled. I learned about Daniel Boone. I've learned about, who else did I learn about? About the Custers, who founded Jefferson County in Indiana. So I've been learning a lot about history, a lot about people, learned a lot about the Indian Wars that General Custer was involved with. So it's been a very interesting journey, and every time I get somebody new to research, I get to learn another little piece of history that makes up this country. And it's fascinating. It is really fascinating. And the fact that I can, and when I'm researching it, I'm knowing that, oh my gosh, the person I'm doing this research for, they have a personal connection to this event or to this place, or to they have a personal connection, like, with great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents that used to live in an area or were involved in settling an area and all of that. And I thought, oh my gosh, they've got this rich history that they had no clue about. They may have had some clue about it. Some of them have no clue at all. And so when you get to tell them, you sit, and the really cool part is, and I'm watching this Genealogy Roadshow, and I'm sitting there, and as I'm telling them, all I can think of is all these, I feel like I'm on the Genealogy Roadshow presenting this information to, as I'm presenting this information to my client, I kind of feel like I'm that Genealogy Roadshow person who's doing the presenting of the tree. And it's kind of cool just to watch their expressions when you reveal something that they didn't even know, because they hadn't been able to research back that far, or they had never heard those stories in their family or anything about them. So anyway, that's it from me for today. Have a super fantastic, sparkling rest of your winning Wednesday, and we will catch you tomorrow for Thankful Thursday. Go make it a great evening. Don't forget to put your wins for the day or the week in the comments below so we can celebrate with you. Hei konera.